following Drunvalo for several years now, and I find him to be such an innovative teacher and so profound, and I'm very, very happy to be sharing him with you today. Now, Drunvalo is the author of 5 books, including The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volumes 1 and 2, Living in the Heart, Serpent of Light, and his newest book is The Mayan Ouroboros. These books have been published in 29 languages. They reach out to over 100 countries throughout the world. He's been on TV, he's on the internet, he's been written about in magazines, newspapers, and books all over the world. And he is a world traveler. He helps people to understand their intimate connection to God. Now, Drunvalo is the first person in the world in modern times to mathematically and geometrically define the human light body, called in ancient times the Merkabah. Drunvalo, welcome to The Great Metamorphosis. It is really such an honor to have you here on the show.
Thank you, Marbeth. I'm really happy to be here. I really am. I don't know where we're going to go with all this, but I'm ready for anything. So.
Me too. I don't know where we're going to. But, well, I thought we could start with talking a little bit about the Merkabah and the Flower of Life, because it's so profound. And I know that I have met people who have looked at me and said, what are you doing that's creating that energy that you have? And I said, oh, the Merkabah meditation. They could see it. They could really see the difference. And I know that you've gone beyond that. So why don't we talk a little bit about that and explain to people here on the Law of Attraction Radio Network what it is that you do.
We do a lot of things. The Merkabah is probably the core of what as we began to first teach. And the Merkabah, as we discovered, and it really was a discovery, was something that was well known over the entire planet thousands of years ago. We know this because there's a symbol that is associated with it, which is called the Flower of Life. It's these 19 interlocking circles. And we found it on a 6,000-year-old wall in Egypt. And that was pretty exciting just to find it there, but then we found it all over Egypt, and then it just kept going. And now we found it in, I think, about 400 and something locations around the world. It's even in the Mayan temples here in Mexico. And but the actual meditation itself was given to me exactly how to do it from an ancient being, Thoth, which is the scribe out of Egypt, and he told me precisely how to do this, and then taught me for about 12 years, or maybe 14 years, about sacred geometry, which is the underlying structure of the universe itself. And that's a kind of a non-debatable subject once you understand what it is, because every single thing in the universe is based on sacred geometry, and there isn't anything, not anything, that isn't. Even things like emotions and feelings are geometrical, and it's been Manfred Klein who figured that out. He was written up in all over the world for that, and so the meditation itself, like I said, is very old. It is nothing new. And however, and I work with the Ascended Masters, and they in 1980 they decided to release this information to the world, and they used 4 different women in different locations around the world to do this. But as they did, they found out that only women were coming to these classes, and no men. There may be 100 women in there, maybe like one guy in the back of the room somewhere. And after 4 years, the Ascended Masters realized that this isn't going to work. We can't get just the women of the planet. We need both. And so they decided in 1984, they got in touch with me, and they wanted me to teach the information associated with this, but in reverse order, so that we began with the Merkabah and not with the heart. And the reason was because they knew that the Merkabah was geometrical, it was logical, men could understand it, and they didn't have to deal with the subtle energies so much, and that worked. It actually immediately started. It jumped from almost 99% women to about 60% women, 40% men.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you would start with the more masculine part.
Well, we weren't getting them, so we picked the most, or they did anyway. They picked the most mathematical, logical part of this whole thing to begin with, and it worked very well, except it had a lot of side effects. There were a lot of casualties on Earth because of this, but they said that they had no choice, that it was either they get almost all people on Earth or they get no one, and so they had to do this. But then in 2010, they said that we have changed so much in the last 20 years that we can now switch back to the original way, which is more appropriate, where you begin with your heart, you understand all you begin to live in the heart, and then slowly you reconnect the heart back to the brain, and then when you do, the Merkabah happens automatically. It's very easy.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting because having done the Merkabah meditation for years, and I know how powerful it is, but the whole explanation has been very linear. And that, as a woman, I think, speaking for me, it was not as easy to grasp. I really had to work at understanding the principles of the sacred geometry in order to understand it. And I definitely have always been able to tap into that heart energy and work from that heart energy. And I think that also coming from, with our planet shifting into the divine feminine, that uniting the masculine and the feminine aspects is really going to be very, very powerful.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is. It's not just the timing, but it's more appropriate to begin with the heart and the female energies, and then move into the male energies. It just works. That's the way it's been done all over the universe for billions of years. And now, so we have a whole new school now. The flower of life is over with. We quit doing that because it's obsolete compared to what we have now. And so now we have a school called Awakening the Illuminated Heart, and we have about 160 teachers in about, 50 countries or so. And by the middle of this year, we'll have about 300 countries and 300 teachers in I don't know how many countries.
So tell me about the Awakening the Illuminated Heart, and what is it that's so different from the old Flower of Life way that you were teaching?
Well, the Merkabah isn't enough, and that became clear. I did what the Ascended Masters told me to do, but it became also very clear to me by 2003 that there's so much more, and I knew there was more. And so by 2003, they gave me a lot of the information. That's when I wrote the book, The Living in the Heart, and we began to teach it differently. And but it wasn't until 2010 that they gave us the original instructions of how to do this the way it was done thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And at this point, we have it all, every single piece of it, even the precise instructions on exactly how to move from the third to the fourth dimension using this information.
So moving from the third to the fourth dimension, which is really the way that the Earth is shifting at this time.
Well, the Earth is already in the fourth dimension.
Right.
Some people know this and some don't. Edgar Cayce predicted that it would happen by the winter of 1998, which means up until March 21st of 1999. And it did move in 1999 into the fourth dimension, but Mother Earth did something that is rare, very, very rare. She knew that we weren't ready even then. We just weren't ready. I mean, just think of yourself going back into 1999. Were you or your listeners, were you ready to make a transformation into another level of existence? I don't think most of us were. We're much better.
No, I don't think so.
And so what Mother Earth did, with great compassion and love, the moment we went fourth dimension, she took control of it, and she reproduced the third dimension. And you can do that. I mean, it's not the first time it's ever been done. And what that did was it bought us time. It bought us, actually up to this point, almost 13, 14 years. And we're in much better position now. And she's still using this mode. However, the new children, the super psychic kids that are coming in here, they've been coming in here since the 80s, they knew, the moment they got in here, they knew that we were actually in the fourth dimension, and that's how they're doing all the things they're doing. I talk to them all the time. And they go into their heart, they can, when it comes to knowing information, they have direct access to the Akashic records. And I mean directly. So they can take a person, and I've watched them do this, they can take a person in an audience of, say, 1,000 people and just pull them out. And they can tell them anything about that person. They can tell, I mean, literally anything at all. And they're 100% correct every time. It doesn't matter. It could even be stupid things like their bank account and how much money they have in it, and the bank account number and everything. They can tell them anything. And this leads into the realization that as we progress up in awareness and consciousness, that there are no secrets. There just are none. When we're going to realize very soon that we can't even think a thought without the whole universe knowing it. And this is, it changes how we perceive ourselves and our relationship to the universe when this begins to take place.
Wow, that's very profound. So we're on the Law of Attraction radio network. And how does your work relate to the Law of Attraction?
Well, okay, you're not going to like probably what I have to say too much. The Secret, for example, that CD that they put out that came through that was based on the Law of Attraction, that actually produced over $1 billion in money, and it produced all of these people that were in there going into war with each other. They're in court, and the money's been tied up, and they're fighting over all of this stuff. And I could have told them this would happen. There's two ways to create in the universe. One is with the brain, and one is with the heart. But if you create through the brain is a polarized instrument. It is half male and half female. And so if you create through the brain, and we know exactly how to do it, we've actually documented it scientifically and everything else, it will work every single time. If you follow the instructions, it will work. But what it will also do is that it will give you exactly whatever your intention is to create in that way. It will give you exactly what you want, but it's also going to give you exactly what you don't want, and an equal strength and value. And it'll come from behind where you won't see it. And a good example of this is James Ray, who is one of the people that put out that CD. And he came to Sedona, and he was so into himself and what he was doing, he was charging $10,000 for a little week-long workshop, and people were paying it. But he also killed a few people in one of his ceremonies, and he's going to be in jail for the rest of his life or for a very long time. And this, we could have predicted this. It's good, based upon it. This is the thing, Marbeth, is that there is another way to create, completely different. And it's not through the brain, but through the heart. And the heart is a unity field that has no polarity in it at all. And so if you learn how to create through your heart, you can have anything you want. It's okay. Literally anything. But what will happen is your heart will give it to you in such a way that it will not cause harm to anyone in the universe or anything at all. It'll be clean, no karma. And so we've been doing it. I mean, basically anything that my wife and I both, whenever we need anything or feel like we want something, we just go into meditation, and we can have it within hours.
Well, you're totally preaching to the choir, because I totally believe that as well. when we are in that heart space and we're coming from that place of love, everything that we pull in, because we're vibrating at such a higher vibration that it's going to pull in.
Agree.
Yeah, it's definitely coming from that unified field.
And there's even more, and which I'll do my best to explain this, but it's not easy to explain because it's outside of human consciousness. Human consciousness believes that the universe is real and that it's solid and that it requires changes. Most humans believe that it requires third-dimensional force in order to make changes in this world in one way or another. But it just isn't true. What is true is that we've mapped this. We have precisely mapped this inside the human body and watch it take place. There are energy fields around our body that most of us don't know, but Stanford has been able to map. There's toroidal fields around that are generated by the heart, and these are the fields that link the heart to the brain. And so that under certain circumstances, when you open the third eye of the brain, but link it so that it doesn't see through the brain, but sees through the heart, and during that time, what will happen is a halo will appear around your head. A perfect sphere of gold light will appear, and you can photograph it. We have done this scientifically and entered it through Dr. Hart into the science journals. And at that moment, when you have a halo and your third eye is open and you're sitting inside the tiny space of your heart, anything is possible. Anything at all. Things that you wouldn't even conceive are possible. But the reason they're possible is because of the nature of what the universe actually is. It's a hologram, first of all. And mathematically, most of the world's mathematicians and scientists are coming to that conclusion. NASA definitely has. And they have found that they actually created a machine to prove that that it is a hologram. And when they put a human being inside the machine, well, you know how with a hologram, if you have a photograph of a hologram, say a photograph of a tree, and if you rip off a little piece of that, say a corner, a little tiny piece of the corner, and you look in there, you'll see the whole tree. And if you take a little tiny piece off of that, but you can barely see, and you look in there, really may have to use a magnifying glass, you'll still see the tree. And no matter how small you go, the whole image is remain in contact. And so NASA, when they wanted to find out what, if it is a hologram, what do they see when they look inside of a human being? And they put a human being in one of these chambers that are linked to the holographic image of the universe. And what they see is the universe. They see the stars. And they see the stars exactly as they are when you're outside. If you were outside at that moment that you were in the machine, that's what you would see, the stars of the moment. And and then they took a little piece of the human being. They took like one hair. They cut one hair off, got the person out, threw the hair in there, and they still see the stars, just as breaking off a piece of a photograph. And that was way back in the late 90s when they discovered this. And now they've come a long ways. But they're coming to the same conclusion we are, I believe, and that is that the holographic nature of the universe, based on the underlying structure of the sacred geometry that defines the structural aspect of it and everything, is that this is an image that is not actually real. It doesn't actually exist in the way that we think it does. It exists only in our brain and our heart. And we have now mapped where, when you say you want to create something from your heart, we can see where and you're in your tiny space of your heart, and you see the image in front of you, and with your intention you say, I want this to be in the outer reality. It moves in a very specific, the image moves in a very specific way. It only will work when the halo is around and you've connected the heart to the brain, because at any other time it won't work, because the ego will not allow it to take place. It just won't. And but what's actually going on is when you connect the heart to the brain in this way is the heart and the brain are in sexual union. And there is pleasure involved between the heart and the brain. And when the brain gets into this level of pleasure, it drops the ego, the part that wants to be in control, and it allows the heart to take over. And at that moment, then these images that are in the tiny place of the heart, you can watch them move. They'll move out through this thing. They'll come in through the choroidal fields of the tiny place of the heart. And our pineal gland has these beams of light. There's 8 of them. They go out to the edge of that sphere that's around the head. And those beams are like antennae that pick up the image and transfer it to the sphere that's around the head for just a nanosecond. And then at the 13th chakra, where that is connected to a bigger sphere that surrounds the entire body. We call it the Leonardo sphere. And that's where the images are, which is, this image now is put into the external field. And so really, everything, the most distant star that's 16 billion years away from our way of thinking, is actually only out at your fingertips.
Wow.
And so
I'm going to stop you here, Drunvalo, because I am following what you're saying, but I've been following you for years. And
okay.
And so there are some things that we need to explain to our listeners. One would be, what is the tiny space of the heart?
What heart math at Stanford discovered is that there's 2 places inside the heart that are very little. The outer one has been given the name the sacred place of the heart, and it has its own choroidal field, which is about 8 to 10 feet in diameter, so it extends way outside of the human body, and science knows this. And then there's another choroidal field inside of that choroidal. A choroidal field is like a donut.
Right.
There's different shapes of these donuts, but that's what it is. And or a magnetic field that's around the Earth is in a choroidal field also.
Right.
And so so inside there's these 2 little places, one inside the other, and this is what the ancient writings talk about, and what like the Upanishads, for example, in India, 5,000 years old, they talk about this very thing, and they say the same thing. They say that all the stars and the planets and the moon and everything is all contained in that tiny space in your heart. And it's where things came from. It's how they all were generated. And
so does this mean that within our hearts, we actually, by our thoughts and by our being in our hearts, what we do will affect the whole universe?
We are the whole universe.
Yeah, good. Beautiful.
We are the universe. That's the truth. And I don't care what anybody says. I've been there, and so have thousands of other people that have been with me in this. And when you go in there and you see the stars in the tiny space of the heart, there'll be a little place, and you look out through a window. It depends, because it's a dreamlike state. And so when you're in this meditation, you don't know what it's going to look like. It's different for every person. But in there, you might find a little window, and you open it up, and you look out, and there's the stars. They look exactly the same as they do when you're looking off the planet. But the stars first were created in the tiny space of your heart, and then they were brought to the external world.
Well, don't you find also that science today is really proving spirituality? And
absolutely.
Yeah.
I deeply believe that when science is accurate and spirituality is accurate, they're identical. They'll be exactly the same.
That's really beautiful. Really, really beautiful. You also mentioned, well, we were talking a little bit about the choroidal field, and I think you explained that. And hopefully, if our listeners have any further question, it's a magnetic field that's shaped like a donut, right? And is very, very powerful. So that our hearts are much greater. in terms of energy and magnetism than our brains. Is there something you'd like to add for that?
Well, when we actually when we do it in the ancient way, and we first get into the tiny space of our heart, and then we reconnect through the tip of our tongue and the roof of our mouth, the tongue is connected directly to the heart, first of all. There's a direct connection with the tip of the tongue and the tiny space of the heart. And physiologically, you can see it because it's inside of a sac. And if you take that sac, if you take the heart of that sac out, mediastinum, I think is what it's called, if you take that sac out, at the very end of that sac is the tongue and the tip of the tongue. And also, even on a kind of a different level, to show that, if you look at creation itself of a baby, it goes through mitosis, and it's a sacred geometrical relationship through the entire thing. It begins as a sphere, then it turns into 2 cells, then when it goes to 4, it goes into a tetrahedron, then it goes to 8, it becomes a star tetrahedron, and it keeps moving up to 512 cells, where then it is a toroidal field like we're talking about. And in my book, I stopped writing about it then, but later I discovered through medical doctors in Germany and India that that toroidal field, as it grows, it becomes the human heart. And so there is a point, and every single person on earth experienced this. There was a time when they didn't have a body, they only had a heart and nothing else. And the heart began to beat. And doctors for years tried to go, how can this beat? There's no brain, there's no nothing, and it's beating. Well, Stanford has now discovered that there's a heart in the brain. It's only 40,000 cells, but it's brain cells, not heart cells. And so that's where the intelligence began with the beating. But then, this is the point that I'm trying to make. When at one point we just have a beating heart, and then our body comes out of the heart, the whole body, the brain, everything, arms, legs, everything, comes out of there, and then the heart is pulled into the chest cavity, and we now have a fetus. But the first thing that came out of from the first part of the body that emerged out of the heart was the tip of the tongue. And,
wow!
And so you can intuitively see that there is a direct connection between the tip of the tongue and the heart, and there is. And in Kundalini and Kriya Yoga, they all know that when you put the tip of the tongue in a very specific place on the roof of the mouth, that something happens.
That's right.
And what that is when you begin to massage that little bump on the roof of the mouth, what happens is there's a direct electrical connection between that bump and the thalamus gland inside, which are these 2 egg-shaped glands at the back of the head. And that is what creates alpha, and alpha is joy. And
yes.
It makes you happy. And you have to have joy to begin to create through the heart. You have to link the brain to it. There's a whole ancient series that they've figured out over billions of years, and it's fun. It's interesting, and once you get it, it's easy. It's not hard, and life becomes easy because you no longer have to struggle. You no longer have to go out. If you need something, whatever your need is, you don't have to go out in the 3D world and fight for it. All you do is go into your heart, you go into a soft, loving space, you present what you need, and you have exactly what you need within whatever time limit you want.
So beautiful, Drunvalo. I mean, this is so close to my heart. I'm also a Kundalini yoga instructor, so I totally get what you're saying. So, yeah, no accidents. That's very, very perfect. So now you're teaching this about awakening the illuminated heart, and how beautiful is this? And you're sharing this all over the world.
Yeah, we want to. I mean, it's up to God. It's not up to us.
Right.
We do it. I've put it out around the world for free. I don't get anything from it, and I don't want anything from it. I just want it to go out to the world as a gift, and for them to. I mean, the individual teachers charge a little bit because they have to eat and everything, But our organization does not want anything back from this at all.
And what a gift it is to humanity that you're sharing this, because this is what we need on this planet, is to awaken our hearts. For so long we've been stuck up in our heads.
It was I know. It happened in Atlantis, and it was about a little less than 13,000 years ago when we did something illegal, the use of energy, and actually we created a Merkabah field actually to control the world, and you're not supposed to do those kinds of things. And actually our whole situation right now, all the wars we're in, and all the craziness, and just the slowly killing the earth and everything else on it, this is because of our misuse of things we did a few thousand years ago. That's all going to be solved very soon, and I think actually this year. This year is the year that I think that we're going to. This is going to be a really good year.
I know. I've been looking at some of the things that you've been saying recently, that this year is going to be very pivotal on the planet. Can you tell us why?
Well, I work not only with scientists and meditation, but I also work with the indigenous people of the world. And the reason I do that is because of my training, is that in order for us to move, for the earth to move into higher consciousness, we have to understand that there were those that came before us, our ancestors, and some of our ancestors still are existing on Earth in the old form. The Aboriginals in Australia, the Waitaha in New Zealand, the Kogi and the Arawakos, and the Wiwasnik and Guamos in Colombia, and the Hopi in Arizona. There are tribes that hold knowledge that is so old that we don't even know it exists anymore. And yet we can't go on. We can't evolve and ascend as a planet into a higher level of consciousness without knowing that information.
Right.
We have to connect with them. And so I know that most people aren't going to do that because it just probably isn't going to happen. And so I'm doing it for them. I'm making connections all around the world, and these indigenous people, they're ready. They know that they can't leave without us. They have to have the information we have, and we have to have their information. And so I completely forgot where we were going with that in the first place.
That's okay.
What was your original question?
The question was about this year, this being a magical year.
Oh, okay. The Mayans are the timekeepers, and through the leaders of the Mayans, Don Alejandro Cerrillo and Don Pedro Pablo Chupec, who is now the leader of the Mayan people, they have given us the Mayan prophecy, which most of the world is listening to on an indigenous world. They have told us that that December 21st, 2012 was, yes, that is the moment when the Earth and the Sun and the center of the galaxy align in a straight line, and that is the beginning of a new time, a whole new way of being. But the moment that it actually starts doesn't happen on that day. It happens on about 7 or 8 years, a window that's about 7 or 8 years long, before and after. It began on October 24th, 2007, with a sign that was predicted by the Hopi 200 years ago, that there would be a blue star that would appear in the sky. That would be the moment when this window of time would begin. And on that day, it was a phenomena that was so huge and that nobody talked about it in the world. I still can't believe this, because the largest object ever seen ever in the universe appeared. I mean, in our solar system, and not one newspaper talked about it. But on that day, a small comet came in. It came in earlier, of course, but on that day, on October 24th, this thing exploded into a blue sphere of light. and it finally reached, when it reached its full size, it was bigger physically than the sun, and its size in the sky was bigger than the sun, and could be seen every single night by anybody on Earth, and yet nobody talked about it. But that was the beginning of this window. And now the rest of this prophecy is that there will be a red star that will appear in the sky, which will be the end of this window when we reach the other side of it, or when, and some interpret this as when we actually begin, the Earth begins its ascension, and that may happen, Marbeth, really. We now, if you look at the star, if you look at the three stars of the belt of Orion, around that are 4 stars that make sort of a rectangle around it. And if you look up in the top left-hand corner, that is Betelgeuse, as it's often called.
It's called what?
Betelgeuse.
Betelgeuse, the upper left corner.
Yes, and that star, in the last couple of years or so, began to implode. And when a star implodes, it's going to do one of two things. It's going to keep imploding and become a white dwarf, or it's going to explode, reverse around and explode, and become a supernova. Well, right now, that star is turning red. If you look at it, you'll see it's red, which means, I believe, from my understanding of things, that it is beginning to explode. And the scientists, our astronomers all over the world are waiting for this. If it does explode, and it will actually appear as a new sun in our solar system, a red sun, and it'll be a red star. Only it'll be as big as it'll appear as big as our sun. And even though it's a long ways away, it's still very close to us. It's not that far away from us. It's so close from us that, according to astronomers, we're going to feel the impact of this explosion on Earth. And so that is the two parameters of this window of time. We're in the window right now, and we have about another 3 more years in this window before the Mayan before we can say that the Mayans were wrong. The Mayan prophecy does not end until approximately January 1st of 2016. And so when we come in that date, if the Mayan prophecy hasn't begun, then we have to admit that they were wrong. But so far, they've never been wrong in anything ever. And so I believe they're going to be right. They're predicting that from February 18th and 19th, which we've already passed,
right,
that this is going to be the time when we begin. And science, which is now coming to really a lot of the same conclusions that the Mayans have already been talking about, they're already predicting the same things. I mean, if you know what really is going on scientifically in our solar system, it would make you sit up straight in your chair and take notice, because what's happening out there is something that no one, anywhere, ever, has ever seen before. And the only only country that's reporting this is Russia. Mm-hmm. Our country is hiding all of this information. We will not. In fact, Obama just announced to his inner core about 6 weeks ago that we're not to talk about the magnetic field, and because the magnetic field of the Earth right now is one of the greatest. It is one of the greatest threats to humanity that we've ever had.
Why is that?
It's far greater than if we had a full-out tilt atomic war on Earth. It would be nothing compared to what would happen if with the magnetic field if we're not prepared. Well, the magnetic field. Now, again, if we start talking about this, I don't know if they're even going to let you put this out. Nova made the first film in November of 2003. Nova put out a film called Magnetic Storm, and your audience can buy that video and see it. But now a new one has been made in about 2011 or 12 that has upgraded this to what it is now. And basically, the magnetic field of the Earth at this moment, scientifically, is going to go away. It's going to disappear and come back, and the North is going to become the South, and the South is going to become the North. This is no little thing. This is, you might not think that it would have any effect on a human being, but every single thing in your body just about is regulated by the Earth's magnetic field.
Isn't this what you wrote about in The Flower of Life? If we have the poles shifted and then the magnetic field disappears and then comes back?
Yes, the magnetic field, before there's a pole shift, there's always a magnetic field shift first.
Uh-huh.
And that, they now know pretty much exactly what's going to happen in all of this. None of the scientists will even talk about the pole shift. They will not discuss it. You can't get any of them to discuss this. That's too scary.
Hasn't the North Pole already migrated 800 kilometers?
No, that's the magnetic field.
Okay.
The magnetic field began to move about 180 years ago. First a little bit at a time, and then it started moving more and more and more. Right now it's moving about 40 miles a year. Right now it entered into land on Russia, and so the separation between the magnetic pole and the actual physical pole is huge right now, and which is causing the internal Earth, the structure that is generating the magnetic field, is tilted at a huge angle to the other one. And this is causing over 35 major diseases on Earth. Ringing in the air.
I have a question, because if we are holographic, and if this is an expression of what is going on inside of us, can we not influence this?
Well, maybe. But we have to have permission to do these kinds of things.
Well, of course.
And who you're talking to get permission is Mother Earth and Father Sun.
Right.
And I've had long discussions with her, thinking along that same line. Well, can't we just go in and stop this and make it easy? But if you can do it, okay. But with my discussion with Mother Earth, she has told me that for billions of years, the way that we are proceeding has been the way. And the way is that new levels of consciousness come out of violence. Violence there's been no life on Earth without violence. We come out of volcanoes. Volcanoes is where life comes from.
Right.
And huge CMEs and solar flares coming off of the sun, projecting massive amounts of information and knowledge onto the Earth. And so basically what she's telling me is that it's okay, don't worry. Everybody's going to be fine on Earth, but we are going to go through a rather violent time on Earth in the near future. In fact, probably. And but we're not going to, she says, that people are not going to be here at that time when these things happen. We're going to leave right prior to it. And then all of that will be happening, but we won't be here. And then we're still going to be on Earth.
We'll be in another dimension, is what you're saying?
We're just going to go from the third dimension of the Earth to the fourth dimension of the Earth.
Oh.
It's kind of like changing the television channel on a TV. It's really similar.
Okay.
It's just wavelength. That's all it is. And we change the wavelength, and poof, we're in another level of Earth's consciousness.
Drunvalo, I could go on with you for hours, but unfortunately our time is up. And I just so enjoyed this. Where would you like to send our listeners to find out more information about you and what you do?
It's pretty simple. It's just drunvalo.net.
Drunvalo.net. That's DRUNVALO.net.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. This has been so much fun. I've loved it. Wasn't that fun? Didn't you have a great time? You have been listening to...
Only women were coming to these classes and no men. There may be 100 women in there, maybe like one guy in the back of the room somewhere. And after 4 years, the ascended masters realized that this isn't going to work. We can't get just the women of the planet. We need both. And so they decided in 1984, they got in touch with me, and they wanted me to teach the information associated with this, but in reverse order, so that we began with the Merkabah and not with the heart. And the reason was because they knew that the Merkabah was geometrical, it was logical, men could understand it, and they didn't have to deal with the subtle energies so much, and that worked. It actually immediately started. It jumped from almost 99% women to about 60% women, 40% men.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you would start with the more masculine part.
Well, we weren't getting them, so we picked the most, or they did anyway. They picked the most mathematical, logical part of this whole thing to begin with. And it worked very well, except it had a lot of side effects. There were a lot of casualties on Earth because of this. But they said that they had no choice, that it was either they get almost all people on Earth or they get no one. And so they had to do this. But then in 2010, they said that we have changed so much in the last 20 years that we can now switch back to the original way, which is more appropriate, where you begin with your heart, you understand you begin to live in the heart, and then slowly you reconnect the heart back to the brain, and then when you do, the Merkabah happens automatically. It's very easy.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting because having done the Merkabah meditation for years, and I know how powerful it is, but the whole explanation has been very linear. And that, as a woman, I think, speaking for me, it was not as easy to grasp. I really had to work at understanding the principles of the sacred geometry in order to understand it. And I definitely have always been able to tap into that heart energy and work from that heart energy. And I think that also coming from, with our planet shifting into the divine feminine, that uniting the masculine and the feminine aspects is really going to be very, very powerful.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is. It's not just the timing, but it's more appropriate to begin with the heart and the female energies, and then move into the male energies. It just works. That's the way it's been done all over the universe. But the actual meditation itself was given to me exactly how to do it from an ancient being, Thoth, which is the scribe out of Egypt, and he told me precisely how to do this, and then taught me for about 12 years, or maybe 14 years, about sacred geometry, which is the underlying structure of the universe itself, and that's a kind of a non-debatable subject once you understand what it is, because every single thing in the universe is based on sacred geometry, and there isn't anything, not anything, that isn't. Even things like emotions and feelings are geometrical, and it's been Manfred Klein who figured that out. He was written up in all over the world for that, and so the meditation itself, like I said, is very old. It is nothing new, and however, and I work with the Ascended Masters, and they in 1980 they decided to release this information to the world, and they used 4 different women in different locations around the world to do this. But as they did, they found out that old
following Drunvalo for several years now, and I find him to be such an innovative teacher and so profound, and I'm very, very happy to be sharing him with you today. Now, Drunvalo is the author of 5 books, including The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volumes 1 and 2, Living in the Heart, Serpent of Light, and his newest book is The Mayan Ouroboros. These books have been published in 29 languages. They reach out to over 100 countries throughout the world. He's been on TV. He's on the Internet. He's been written about in magazines, newspapers, and books all over the world. And he is a world traveler. He helps people to understand their intimate connection to God. Now, Drunvalo is the first person in the world in modern times to mathematically and geometrically define the human light body, called in ancient times the Merkabah. Drunvalo, welcome to The Great Metamorphosis. It is really such an honor to have you here on the show.
Thank you, Marbeth. I'm really happy to be here. I really am. I don't know where we're going to go with all this, but I'm ready for anything. So.
Me too. I don't know where we're going to. But, well, I thought we could start with talking a little bit about the Merkabah and the Flower of Life, because it's so profound. And I know that I have met people who have looked at me and said, what are you doing that's creating that energy that you have? And I said, oh, the Merkabah meditation. They could see it. They could really see the difference. And I know that you've gone beyond that. So why don't we talk a little bit about that and explain to people here on the Law of Attraction Radio Network what it is that you do.
We do a lot of things. The Merkabah is probably the core of what as we began to first teach. And the Merkabah, as we discovered, and it really was a discovery, was something that was well known over the entire planet thousands of years ago. We know this because there's a symbol that is associated with it, which is called the Flower of Life. It's these 19 interlocking circles. And we found it on a 6,000-year-old wall in Egypt. And that was pretty exciting just to find it there. But then we found it all over Egypt, and then it just kept going. And now we found it in, I think, about 400 and something locations around the world. It's even in the Mayan temples here in Mexico. And